Good morning to everybody, and thank you for joining. I just want to actually thank Dr. Carcedo for putting this together and the North Harvest Bean Growers Association. They're so supportive of NDSU Extension and our programming. I'm Shaundra Ziemann-Bolinske. I'm the Food Systems Coordinator at NDSU Extension, which means that I help consumers understand how their food is produced and processed, to help them make good decisions. There's so much information out there today. And I'll be talking a little bit about the longevity benefits of dry beans and a bit about farm to table. So over the next 20 minutes or so, we'll cover the 5 blue zones. I wanted to share a little bit about blue zones because I've had public health partners bring in grant funding, and it's helped make other programs that I teach, like diabetes prevention program, a little bit more robust thanks to that funding. We're also going to dig into bean nutrition a little bit. I'm a food scientist, not necessarily a dietitian. That's where Julie comes in, but there's a bit of overlap when we're talking about these subjects. And then touch briefly on how beans are processed. Anna's going to take that in, a little bit further in depth, but and then we'll also finish with practical recommendations for incorporating beans into your diet. Julie started that a little bit, but we'll go into it a little bit more. So first, let's orient ourselves to the concept of blue zones. I did borrow this photo from the bluezones.com website. There's 5 regions around the world where people are living notably longer, healthier lives, and in some cases into their 90s and 100, into their hundreds, completely chronic disease free. So this was really remarkable for researchers, and they dug into why that was. So we'll talk about it a little bit, but it really revolves around beans. So those areas are, as you can see, in Japan, Okinawa specifically. There's a specific province in Sardinia, Italy, and actually that's, if you look into it further, they talk about this is where the oldest men in the world live. And there's many old men in this area, they say. And that's actually literally how it is written on the website. There is a place in Costa Rica, the Nicoya Peninsula, Ikaria, Greece. Now, I've seen this spelled with a C or a K, so you'll see it differently as we go through the presentation. Even on the picture there, it has a C. And then Loma Linda is an area in California, and we're specifically talking about a Seventh-day Adventist population there in California. So these researchers have identified a set of shared lifestyle pillars that help them live a long and vigorous life, specifically regular low-intensity movement, strong social networks, predominantly plant-based diets. I'm an omnivore, as Julie said too. This is not necessarily promoting that you would only eat plants, but in the blue zones, it is a 95% plant-based diet typically, and they're very intentional about stress reduction practices. And these are basically the underpin of exceptionally long living communities. One striking commonality across all 5 of these regions is bean consumption. Residents eat at least a half cup of cooked beans every day, often up to a full cup, and residents of blue zones typically eat 4 times the amount of beans compared to the average American intake. Beans provide a cost-effective source of protein, complex carbohydrates, of fiber, vitamins and minerals, so those micronutrients, making them a staple that contributes both to feeling full, we call it satiety, and to long-term health benefits. So this hits home in North Dakota and I mentioned it a second ago, but there are grant-funded projects in our state. Specifically, it's really big in the Grand Forks area. They might be wrapping that funding up here pretty soon. And then in the Burleigh County area, and the intention of this funding from the Department of Health is to help North Dakotans make healthier choices and to make that healthier choice easier for us, for everyone, and to help us make that transformation for our community's environment and that culture piece, incorporating these healthful choices into our culture, kind of as we do with the recipes with beans, and we'll see some examples here in the future, or in the next few slides. So the idea is to improve overall well-being and potentially lower health costs with this grant funding. So just breaking down a little bit about, this is from the International Journal of Molecular Studies, which is showing that beans are a great source of macronutrients and micronutrients. So the macros are your protein, your carbohydrates, and your fats. And this gives you an idea of several types of dry beans here in this chart, but really high fiber, high protein. So the FDA, USDA defines, what an excellent source is, and these would contribute at that level. So on the macro or micronutrient side, they're also a source of phosphorus. That's not on the slide here, but they're high in iron typically, zinc, magnesium, potassium, several B vitamins. Beyond that, beans contain phytochemicals, resistant starch, polyphenols, antioxidants, the things that are good for us, that support gut health and may help modulate inflammation. So epidemiological studies, of how things affect our bodies, right, overall, showing that consuming 3 or more servings of legumes, the all-inclusive term for beans, and I'm glad Julie showed that chart, weekly, is linked to a 26% lower risk of heart disease, an 8 to 15% reduction in colorectal cancer, and type 2 diabetes risk. And so that's why some of the Blue Zone funding that we received from the Department of Health was able to work with our diabetes prevention program. So a little cross-link, which I appreciated. And so also an increase of about 4 years total in life expectancy. The prebiotic fibers in beans. So if we remember the difference between prebiotic and probiotic, I just put it as the prebiotic feeds the good bacteria in your system. So the prebiotic is basically the food to the probiotics. And so those prebiotic fibers in beans also foster a diverse and resilient gut microbiome, which is increasingly recognized as a key player in overall health. So in practice, each Blue Zone has its own signature bean-based dishes. Okinawans add beans to miso. So miso, I just think of miso soup when I go out to eat. I should make it at home, actually. Miso is a fermented soybean paste, just to explain it a little bit. It's a staple in Japanese cuisine. It's known for its rich umami flavor, and if you haven't heard that word before, it's one of the 5 basic tastes. It goes along with sweet and salty, sour and bitter, and now we have umami. It's made by fermenting soybeans with koji, which is a type of fungus that also forms the basis for sake, which is a rice wine, and other fermented foods too. So just to explain that a little bit, and miso is mixed often with tofu preparations, and tofu, of course, is ground soybeans, and there's a salt that helps it coagulate, like a curd. So curds in whey, if you think about that. So that mixture essentially forms curds, and usually that salt is a magnesium chloride or a calcium sulfate. Now in Italy, Sardinians stew fava beans, and they look very similar to soybeans, I'm going to say, because I'm not the one who specifically grows and grows those like Juan might. So for the general consumer, they look like soybeans, I'm going to say, and baby soybeans like edamame. Nicoyans prepare black beans in their traditional gallo pinto. Icarians in Greece feature white beans in both salads and stews. I went out to eat this last weekend with a girlfriend at my favorite restaurant in Bismarck here called the Pirogue Grill. If you have a chance, check it out. They like to serve local foods. And they had a white bean vegetable soup that was just fantastic as a on their a la carte menu this weekend. Um, and then in Loma Linda, the Adventist communities consume legumes at least 3 times a week and are known for a good chili. These cultural traditions highlight the culinary versatility of beans. And so just sharing a few of those consistent cultural dishes that help them consume beans more. Anna's going to go over processing dry beans a little bit more. Commercial beans are machine harvested and dried before passing through screens. I'll let her talk about how everything's removed. But you could do this at home too, and that's what they're showing here is a home gardeners harvesting your own beans. They're then sorted by size and color and grade. I look forward to Dr. Osorno's message here on all of this coloring of his pinto beans particularly. From there, beans may be packaged as whole dried beans or further processed into what we call value-added products. So canned beans, bean flours. Julie talked about some applications that sound really fun. I know I've had her gluten-free brownies that are made with, I think it was chickpeas the way we made it. They were fantastic. You wouldn't have even known. My husband was impressed when I made it for supper one night. And they can even have frozen preparations, split beans. So we'll hear from the experts a little bit more on those applications. And Dr. Gordon Robinson talked about how to soak, and she'll get into that. So I'll just quick touch base that there's a few different ways to soak. There's a quick soak with boiling water typically, or a cool water soak. And what we're trying to do is destroy the gas producing compounds. And there's different compounds. You might hear the word lectin, which is the overall umbrella term. An example of a lectin, which is a protein in the outside covering of the beans, but an example of a lectin is gluten. So at home or in food service, soaking and cooking are the primary processing steps. Soaking reduces these oligosaccharides that cause the gas, and a rapid boil ensures safety by destroying pathogens too. So a food safety piece there, while still retaining most vitamins and phytochemicals, those phytonutrients I was talking about earlier. So for recipe inspiration, NDSU Extension offers numerous bean-based recipes. Julie talked about them. I'm going to credit her with perfecting those recipes over the years with her team. So to capture the health benefits we've discussed, overall, aim for at least 1/2 cup to 1 full cup of beans per day. And I appreciate beans. My brother had salmonellosis when he was 1 year old, so he almost died of salmonella. Uh, you know, getting into his baby food basically. And as I interviewed for this job a decade ago, I looked up the prevalence of salmonellosis, and that year it was off the charts compared to other years. So he wasn't the only one, and it was pork and beans, the good old pork and beans, whatever you need to do to get your beans in. But that's essentially what he lived off of for a while. Also another tip is use overnight soaking followed by a rapid boil, and consider repurposing cooking water, as Julie mentioned, with that aquafaba. I'm going to try that. I haven't tried that yet, but I did find an entire thesis on it, a grad student focused on that very message. So there's enough in there to write a whole thesis. And then finally, here's an important piece. Incorporate meals communally, as social engagement itself is a powerful longevity factor. And maybe you perfect your bean recipe and you always bring that recipe to your potlucks or what have you. And this is my last slide besides just the ending and the very last thank you for your time. So in summary, dry beans are a very low cost, nutrient dense staple that supports health span and lifespan. I think of it as being quite convenient too if you work with your food pantries. It is a way to get a high protein source that's shelf stable. Lessons from the blue zones remind us that simple dietary shifts like adding more beans can yield profound benefits. Meanwhile, in the US, processing ensures beans remain safe, accessible, and ready for today's busy kitchens. Just thank you again for having us. And this is a fantastic panel. I'm lucky to be a part of it.